Content warning. The following video briefly touches on themes of essays, stalking, and other graphic content. Keep in mind, for things to make sense, I'll also be spoiling this film entirely. Perfect Blue is a 1997 psychological horror anime film directed by Satoshi Kon, loosely based on the light novel Perfect Blue: Complete Metamorphosis. You may also know him for his other acclaimed works such as Millennium Actress, Tokyo Godfathers, or Paprika. I was debating about making this video and initially decided against it as I felt like there was so much YouTube coverage on Perfect Blue already, but a viewer had mentioned they would like to see this video, so I decided to make it anyway. As always, you don't have to agree with any interpretation examined. In the opening, we see 3 Powertrons dressed in blue, red, and green. This is of note as these colours pop up later, which I'll point out. By wearing masks or fronts, according to Kon, the Powertrons introduce this motif to Perfect Blue. Kon says, viewers might not notice until the second time through. He continues, the movie is all about the personas people wear. These Powertrons fight a villain called King Berg, or the ruler of the bug. Kon says this is an allusion to how Mima develops bugs of her own humanity. Before meeting our protagonist, Mima, the scene then briefly focuses on 2 boys running, one in red and one in blue. As we'll see, despite being called Perfect Blue, the film's dominant colour is arguably red, especially due to its saturation. However, I wanted to point out the boys as I think blue as well as other colours are worthy of consideration. In my opinion, blue shouldn't just be disregarded. From what I've seen, blue and red are contrasted against each other constantly. From the 2 boys, the colours of Mima's fish, to the blue stereo in the lift, or even the colours of the font. Because of these parallels, I think blue acts as a sort of counterpart to red. From these first few scenes, we can already see blue and particularly red seep in. Like in the general background, the contrasting red and blue vending machine, a red clock, and the red shoes of the idol group. We are then introduced to Mima, a Japanese idol in the group Cham. The pop idols are dressed in sweet innocent pink, which define Mima's idol image. We soon learn that Mima has decided to leave Cham to pursue a serious career as an actress. Therefore, pink can represent Mima's past, her pop idol career, which she struggles to shed. And as the film progresses, we see this sweet pink era continually haunt her. Having been stalked for a few years since my early teens, the general themes of stalking and paranoia, as we'll soon learn, really resonated with me. But Perfect Blue is more than just a film about stalking. The film touches on themes from fragmented identity, self-perception, conforming to expectations, to the perils of celebrity worship. I want to explore this recurrent theme of identity fragmentation and the distortion of reality and illusion first. Like blue is the warmest colour, Perfect Blue appears to heavily use the motif of reflections in discussions on identity, particularly a fragmentation of identity. Mima is returning home, gazing out of the window. At this point, we don't see anything unusual, just Mima's reflection. As the film progresses, we see mirrors and reflections act as an expression of Mima's shifting mental state, blurring the boundaries between reality and illusion. Aside from reflecting themes of a fragmented identity, reflections can comment on another theme of public and private identity. As a window, the visual acts as a boundary between the inner and outer world, while simultaneously reflecting Mima's public and private life as a mirror. To give further weight to this theme of public versus private identity, I want to mention that these scenes of Mima on stage, with warm blaring red lights, are cross-cut with scenes of her daily life, which are curiously blue-coded. The difference in these scenes speaks to the duality of Mima's character. Not only does Mima wear blue as she's shopping, the background of this private personal scene is also cool-toned. However, as Mima strolls around the supermarket, we see a disquieting amount of red, which could threaten this public-private dichotomy, standing out as a warning of danger. It's also this realism and depiction of everyday scenes that makes what happens later all the more terrifying. At Mima's stage performance, there's also a lot of men in the crowd that sport these 2 colours, red and blue, either alone or together. The faces of these men are also drawn with little detail, lending to this idea that the crowd is just a mindless cult of celebrity worship. Yet another split of her identity is her announcement that she will leave the sweet, innocent pop idol Mima in the past to pursue a present identity of a serious actress Mima. Before this announcement, a man working security near the stage, looking oddly out of place, points his hand at Mima, making it appear as though she dances in his hand. We see his field of vision blurred around the corners, forcing Mima into clearer definition. In this moment, she's his possession, a toy that dances in his palm. Enraptured by Mima's performance, this strange man later turns out to be an obsessive fan known as Me-Mania. He is injured while struggling with punks that heckle Mima's concert, establishing an association between this particular shade of red from the blood with violence. After this, there's a shot of Mima looking at Me-Mania as if he has saved her. Except this is likely just Me-Mania's imagination, what he wants to see, as we see another near identical shot where Mima's facial expressions are different. She doesn't appear to have been looking at Me-Mania. After the performance, she receives fan mail, a pink letter with a reddish pink heart, perhaps another caution of danger. This is also the first mention of Mima's room, as a fan in the crowd ominously shouts, "I'm always watching Mima's room." After Mima returns home to relax in her apartment, the scene is made up of a static visual montage, focusing on objects around the room to explore the personality of Mima. Firstly, the teddy bears and heart-shaped pillows in Mima's room point to the innocence and infantilism of the 21-year-old, which is an image at odds with her desired portrayal as a serious and mature actress. Whilst red is likely the colour that pops out first, there's again a lot of blue in her room, from her fish, her clothing, to her bed and various other items. In terms of what blue may represent, the blue from the title can refer to the psychological state of depression in which she falls into, or as it commonly represents the sea and sky in Japanese culture of calmness and purity. We see this blueness or sadness as she, whilst wearing blue, removes Cham's poster from her wall, perhaps trying to erase the past pink idol Mima that smiles happily. Red, on the other hand, as stated, can connote danger. But it can also, in conjunction with mirrors and reflections, reflect Mima's declining mental health and spiral into madness. Red as anxiety is evoked as Mima reads her fan letters, in which the background is mostly red. The letter is the second ominous mention of Mima's room. It reads, "I always like looking into Mima's room, I've put up a link to Mima's room." At Mima's apartment, the TV reports that an earthquake has occurred. This can be a comment on the broader impact that the entertainment industry has on society. Real life doesn't matter in a world where increasingly vapid celebrity worship reigns supreme. Mima's mother startles her by calling. On this call, Mima switches to using a Hiroshima dialect, her native dialect, and says, "The pop idol image is suffocating me," which again points to this gap between image and reality. After Mima's mother startles her by calling, Mima gets a second call, of which is just sinister breathing. Again, we see this gap in her image as she immediately changes back from her regional to a standard dialect. Mima then receives a startling fax calling her a traitor. The call and fax are where the first signs of Mima's madness and paranoia begin, where reality and fantasy begin to blur. Because of Mima's spiraling delusions, we as viewers are left to question which scenes are real or not. Alarmed that someone could be watching her, Mima quickly turns to the window and the perspective is now situated outside. Again, blue and red are juxtaposed against each other, as a blue light emanates from virtually every other window except Mima's, which is a warm red. Not only does this draw attention to the idea that Mima is in danger, but this uniform blue light makes the other windows feel cold and clinical, as if a stalker could be camouflaged or concealed, hiding in plain sight. The window scene is linked to the next shot, as Mima's voice overdubs the line, "Who are you?" in Japanese dub, or "Excuse me, who are you?" in the English dub. In the next shot, it is revealed Mima is on set for a TV show called Double Bind, and "Who are you?" is therefore her character's first line. This line is interesting to me as "Who are you?" is also a central line in the film Angel's Egg. "Who are you?" in Perfect Blue can arguably also have a multi-layered meaning. Firstly, as it was first asked over the window shot, "Who are you?" could be a question directed towards Mima's stalker, while simultaneously being a question she directs towards an illusion which later haunts her, or a question she has for herself, especially as she grapples with the clash of her two personas, Mima the pop star and Mima the actress. The series Mima has landed a role in, called Double Bind, is a murder mystery. Firstly, the title Double Bind could reflect the two irreconcilable demands Mima is caught in. On one hand, if she remains an innocent pop idol, she will never achieve the height of fame she desires, disappointing her talent agent. On the other, the choice to shed her clean-cut image disappoints her manager and her fans. As such, it seems that no matter what Mima does, she's unable to escape an undesirable outcome, caught in a double bind. Secondly, the story of Double Bind also begins to mirror Mima's real life. Another dominant colour in Perfect Blue is the colour white. We see this as Mima's manager, Rumi, and her talent agent argue over whether Mima should continue singing alongside her acting career. This colour appears again wearing a white shirt as she acts on set. The obvious connotation of white is that at this stage in Mima's career, she still maintains her pure virginal lily white image. Aside from Mima's clothing, another aspect in which we see white is in the overly bright lights on set. Soon after, Mima begins to focus on the laughs and whispers of the crew. It appears she's paranoid about how she's being perceived. Maybe Mima wonders if they're asking, can a low-level idol make it as a serious and successful actress? Hence, the lights correlate with Mima's increasingly warped sense of perception, brought about by her identity crisis, which is in turn caused by the growing intensity of pressure. A shadowy figure, which appears to be Me-Mania, is then seen in the background. After lobbying the producer of Double Bind, her agent later successfully obtains Mima a bigger role in the show. The producer, again dressed in red, hands Mima's talent agent a pink letter meant for Mima, which explodes. After this letter bomb incident, Rumi helps Mima set up a computer she has bought. In Perfect Blue, the technological world, such as the fax machine, cameras, Mima's computer, TV, and telephones, are interwoven with everyday life. This integration is interesting as it extends to the broader multimedia complex, which can be further commentary on the developing creation, marketing, and consumption of Japanese pop idol culture. After Rumi has left, Mima types in the link for Mima's room, an online web diary from the letter she received. Mima is momentarily relieved from the building tension when she realizes that Mima's room is just a harmless first-person web diary, which chronicles her singing career and mundane moments of her life. But the site's red wallpaper and her pajamas suggest otherwise. As Mima reads further, it reveals private information, like the brand of milk she buys and private thoughts and feelings uploaded publicly onto the site. The red curtain and backdrop against her shocked profile help cement the idea of red as anxiety, danger, and Mima's spiraling madness. This goes back to the motif of reflective surfaces being a boundary between the outside world and Mima's private life. But instead of a hard boundary, the computer, doubling her personal thoughts, acts as more of a portal by making these private moments accessible. Though we, as the audience, know these entries aren't written by Mima, the readers of the site don't, thus blurring the lines between fiction and reality. As this line between her real identity and other people's perceptions become more confused and ambiguous, we again hear the most important line of the film, and Mima's line on Double Bind, "Who are you?" repeated 7 times. Shortly after Mima's Double Bind scene, we cut to another scene of Double Bind where models are being photographed on the runway. Like idols, these models portray images of fantasy. We see flashes of white light which are connected to the next shot. There's a close-up shot of yet another photographer, but instead of being at the fashion show, these flashes of light are photographing a dead model, connecting the concepts of performance and death, which ties back to Mima's anxiety. Mima then goes to her agency, seeing a newspaper clipping in the lift, which details the heckler from her Cham concert being in critical condition. As the lift closes, Mima makes brief eye contact with Me-Mania. At the agency, Mima finds Cham, her former idol group, celebrating their success as a duo. The pressure makes Mima grow more anxious to achieve breakthrough as an actress. But Mima's development as a sexy actress is restricted by her former public image as a cute and innocent idol. Subsequently, when her agent recommends that she irrevocably break her formal image by accepting an essay scene, Mima agrees. Rumi, a mother figure to Mima, attempts to object, exhibiting her protective attitude once again. However, Mima has made up her mind. The script is also bound in a red cover, warning us that this fake SA scene will lead to Mima's descent into madness. Moreover, even the dialogue foreshadows this, as Mima's agent says, Mima's character, Yoko, changes personalities completely. In the next scene, Mima mulls over whether she made the right decision on the train. The decision begins to affect her psyche, and she sees her idol self reflected in the train window. This is the first concrete sign of her madness. From this point on, actress Mima will dress in colder tones, whilst her hallucinated self uses warmer colours of her idol days. Idol Mima is appalled with her decision, telling her, "I absolutely refuse to do it." This brings up the question of why actresses need to go through psychological extremes to give their whole bodies to be taken seriously as artists. Despite the rebellion of this identity, Mima decides to go through with it anyways. Whilst filming this scene, Mima sports a white dress with red elements, thus juxtaposing this white purity and red madness with something she considers to be dirty and degrading, as demonstrated by the rebellion of her other self. The dress also looks like a skimpier version of her idol dress, the pastel ideal of femininity. Consequently, as she's stripped of this dress, Mima is metaphorically stripped of her purity and status as her innocent idol self. Her identity is also stripped apart and commodified as illustrated by the numerous screens. There's also a previous scene where Mima's image is reflected in TVs for sale, not only commodifying but cheapening her image. Despite the actors being professional, apologizing between takes, and Mima insisting she's fine, Mima is still falling apart inside. This psychological SA acts as a catalyst which sees Mima break down and completely lose her mind. Mima is both figuratively and literally pushed over an edge, with her head hanging over the stage, heightening her disconnection from reality. The cuts themselves are fast and disjointed, encapsulating Mima's horror and despair. Although we know Mima hasn't actually been violated, the unfolding of this scene is so realistic that even her talent agent recoils in horror. Meanwhile, Rumi, witnessing the metaphorical death of Mima's innocent persona, runs off in tears. Mima begins to space out and focus on the bright set lights. The motif of lights appears again. The white light merges with Mima as she mentally escapes this fictional scene by envisioning herself as an idol. The overwhelmingly white light may represent a light of fantasy, Mima as what appears to be an incredibly successful idol with her purity still intact. As a result, we could infer that these lights symbolize Mima's identity, perception, and the need for performance. By trying to mentally escape to the pop idol industry, it could be that Mima idealizes the pop industry as pure while seeing the acting industry as dirty. Afterwards, we see Mima sitting in her dressing room full of mirrors. She wears black, the antithesis of white, mourning and grieving the loss of her innocence. Her agent, feeling guilty, drives Mima back home. Her apartment is sunken in half darkness. We can only see parts of Mima's room in red, signs of madness. Mima tries to feed her fish, only to find them seemingly dead. Mima breaks down over the dead fish, a symbol of her innocence. Instead of crying over her fish, Mima laments the death of herself. She weeps over being pushed into the scene, revealing she had no real agency, no real say. For Mima, there is no point of return. And for fans, Mima is now, for lack of a better term, spoiled. After we see idol Mima taunt her in the reflective computer screen, two fish swim in Mima's tank, revealing they are alive. In terms of what these fish represent, these could be two Mimas as per Kon, fighting for survival within her. Me-Mania struggles with the themes of the film just as much as Mima. Me-Mania depicts the perils of celebrity worship. The film cuts to a scene of Me-Mania's room. This glimpse into his private life, his own room full of Mima's posters, makes it clear he isn't a harmless fan, but rather deranged. Despite becoming more frustrated over Mima's diversion from her idol self, Me-Mania is unable to face reality. He is a representation of what happens when fans are unable to separate a false online or public persona from reality, taking this perception as a truth which never existed. Me-Mania can also serve as the manifestation of danger and paranoia which plagues Mima. The controversial SA scene helps Mima's career advance. Returning to work, Mima's personality, like her double-bind counterpart Yoko, changes drastically. The old Mima is dead, and this new Mima starts wearing darker colours with bolder red makeup and lower cut clothing. In some of these scenes, Mima is wearing white. If this means anything, it's likely this isn't to symbolise her purity, but to spotlight the moralistic opposition of the filthy and pure, especially as later she takes off the colour white again. The fictional SA scene has birthed a virtual Mima, which becomes more real over the course of the film. Mima decides to revisit the Mima's room site. The site has the phrase "help me" plastered all over it. Mima sees her doppelganger visualized in the computer. The copy taunts her, saying the real Mima is writing this. I know that deep down in your heart you want to be an idol again. On top of that, she calls her filthy and tarnished. As she's saying this, notice that her background transitions from blue, green and red, the colours of the Powertrons and Mima's idol group. This phase of the film is where Mima experiences peak internal and external persecution. The apparition begins to grow, coming out of the computer to dominate the scene. Mima's double is always shown to be surrounded by a white light. White in Japanese culture can represent purity. The double cements this perspective, telling her, you can't step back into the spotlight now. From now on, I'll be the light and you'll be in the shadows. If this double is a figment of Mima's psyche, the doppelganger's sexist torment, coupled with the stolen white light of Mima's idol era, speaks to this being Mima's own internalized misogyny. She taunts herself over this perceived loss of purity. Mima is her own worst critic. I want to note the blue, red and green as a fragmentation of her identity. The colour scheme of Cham is blue, green and red, the red being visible in her shoes. Chances are you've heard the RGB colour model or an RGB effect, which stands for red, green and blue. Cham's three colours are the primary colours of light or white light. Therefore, it could be that without Cham, Mima is incomplete. Without Cham, she is also surrounded by red madness, as opposed to the purity and heaven found in idol Mima's white. This line of thinking can also be supported by a later scene in which we see these three colours visualised as literal lights. The screenwriter of Double Bind hears music playing in the parking lot. One particularly revealing lyric sings, "Can you see the angel's white wings?" When the lift opens, it reveals a blue stereo against the brightly saturated red floor. As you can see, the colours are becoming more and more saturated, accentuating Mima's descent into madness. The highly saturated red makes Mima's world appear fake and artificial. Shortly after, the screenwriter is dead, but we don't see who dispatches him. The screenwriter creates Mima with his eyes or vision, hence his eyes are taken for the objectifying role and vision he had for Mima. Cham is about to perform and a rumour circulates that Mima will return to perform on stage. Me-Mania is at the performance ground. He zooms his camera into Cham's poster, where only the duo is present. However, there is a gap between them, where Mima used to be. The scene then transitions to Mima in a car positioned where she would be between the duo. Mima worries about the producer's death as it's reported on the news. The car windows become tinted with red, and soon after, the illusory idol Mima passes by mouthing, "Serves you right." A perverted photographer begins taking photos of Mima. These scenes become intertwined with Cham's performance. It appears that the photographer has made Mima strip off her white clothing for the second time. However, another shot shows Mima fully clothed as her agent tries to convince her out of the toilet to go through with it. Mima's idol doppelganger taunts her again. Glowing white, she tells her what people really want is for Mima to be an idol on stage. This glowing Mima is then seen on stage with her former group members. Me-Mania ecstatically tapes the performance. The crowd looks momentarily shocked, but ends up cheering. The two other members look concerned or anxious. One interpretation of this could be that the idols are trying to keep up the performance, making up for Mima's lacking presence. Alternatively, it could be that they realize Mima's presence had always outshone theirs as a trio. Despite not being there, Mima is the one they cheer for. Another possibility is that Rumi, Mima's manager, who ends up trying to take over Mima's identity, is actually performing on stage. We know Mima's not there, but Rumi is, having interrupted the duo's conversation just moments prior. If this is Rumi, it could be an explanation for why the girls look so uncomfortable. The performance then cuts to a Mima's room post, stating that she had fun singing for everyone. This lends credence to the theory, as it is likely that Rumi wrote these entries. However, if this is Rumi, we don't see this addressed in the film again. Further explanations include this being a complete hallucination by either Mima or Me-Mania. Despite her taunting, Idol Mima's portrayal of idol work as pure is ironic considering their uniform male audience. Their performances are in a similar vein exploitative. The treasured chastity of the girls, placed on a pedestal, is still fetishized. Their presentation is specifically tailored to capitalize off of this image. This is evident in their song. They sing about how they would like to read comics, staying the same forever, to be a woman that suited you. And also in their previous song, Angel of Love, they mention how their eyes are gazing at you. That sweet voice and those gentle hands, they exist only for you. The song encourages the men to be more assertive, because the chance will surely appear. If you only have a bit of courage, the angel of love will be smiling at you. As a result, whilst Mima does have two options, actress or idol, there doesn't seem to be a choice where exploitation is not present. It's unclear to me whether Mima hiding in the toilet happened before or during the unclothed shoot, but it seems that Mima has gone through with it. Mima screams in the tub. The film then cuts to Me-Mania frantically buying all copies of the magazine featuring Mima's shoot. The scene ends up back at Me-Mania's room full of Mima memorabilia, and we witness Me-Mania's own blurring of reality and delusion through the blurred line between internet and reality. Me-Mania's use of the internet, in which he spends most of his time in Mima's room, becomes his means of escape. Even the Mima posters begin talking to him. Idol Mima, surrounded by a white glow, then appears on Me-Mania's shoulders. Idol Mima tells Me-Mania that the regular Mima is an imposter, and that he's the only one she can depend on, encouraging his delusions. This is likely Rumi's doing. Me-Mania comes to the conclusion that in order to save her, he must get rid of regular Mima. These parts of the film can reflect on toxic fan culture and how people may use the internet as a gateway to seemingly turn their dreams into a reality. This brings us to how Perfect Blue was in so many ways ahead of its time. In the social media age, it appears that Perfect Blue is becoming more relevant than ever, having recognized the disturbing possibilities of this tech. Much of Perfect Blue's messages can be adapted for modern audiences. More and more people are experiencing digital depersonalization. As inhabitants of the cyber world, our identity is becoming increasingly entangled with both the real and virtual. To some, the virtual self and what we project online is becoming even more important than our real selves. It's more relevant as this type of identity curation and double life was arguably something only celebrities had to perform in the 90s. But with the advent of internet accessibility, the average person is beginning to connect their identity to performance, curating and controlling every aspect of their online image. As regular people, we may heavily script and market ourselves, but to who and why? In a way, aren't we all becoming Mima? Not to mention this need for nothing short of a perfect performance of identity for those living in the public eye. It seems that social media has only made strangers more intrusive and entitled to feeling a sense of ownership over public figures. Mima is criticized, scrutinized, and attacked by her own fans that claim to love her. But what's scary to me is that people appear to make little differentiation between a traditional celebrity with a whole team behind them and the ability to filter out things like fan mail and your average TikToker. To add, with increased internet interconnectivity, the boundary between real and virtual are becoming increasingly blurred. These hard boundaries of a personal space, like Mima's home, have been threatened. Although I mentioned briefly that the blue in the title can allude to the melancholia in the film, Kon explained in an interview with Andrew Osmond that he used Perfect Blue because it was the title of the original novel. He continues, "We discussed changing the title, but I liked it. It sounds significant and mysterious." Though this doesn't mean that the title is devoid of meaning, or that we can't assign our own interpretations and meanings to the film. Aside from highlighting the colour blue, one such interpretation is that the title is an allusion to the film's blue sky. The sky can be viewed as another representation of Mima's shifting mentality. As time begins blending for Mima, we see the sky becoming more cloudy, and an increasing amount of rain. We see this as Mima is on set for Double Bind. Mima acts against the dark clouds and red beams, which are a glaring symbol of her madness. The dialogue is also telling. Mima's character, Yoko, says, "I don't know anything about myself anymore." As Mima herself doesn't know what's going on, she is an unreliable narrator. Kon tries to purposely mislead us by having Mima's character mention, "I'm scared that my other self will do something I don't know about." Consequently, we're led to believe that one plausible interpretation is that Mima's illusory double has taken on a life of its own. The other character reassures Yoko, telling her there's no way illusions can come to life. Mima is then frightened when she sees Me-Mania on set. Later, Mima visits her former idol members when she sees a glowing idol Mima sitting between them. This causes Mima to freak out, and the background turns red again. When idol Mima skips away, Mima chases after her, falling against a mirror. She continues chasing idol Mima through the mostly black and blue umbrellas. Shortly before she runs out in front of a truck, there's one red umbrella which stands out from the rest. The truck, driven by Me-Mania, hits Mima. We then get the first wake up. Waking up on her bed, Mima is fine. We're led to believe this might have been a dream. In the background, the TV reports on the Economic Planning Agency. The doorbell rings, it's Rumi dressed in red, a symbol of danger. The pair talk over tea and Rumi says something near identical to the actress on the previous set. She reassures Mima, there's no way illusions can come to life. The scene cuts back to the set. Mima wakes up on her bed for the second time. The TV reports on the same news story and Rumi visits to have tea again. When Mima tells Rumi it's been a while, Rumi responds that she was here yesterday. What's unsettling about this scene is that the details don't quite add up. If yesterday was a different day, why would the same news story be reported? This unsettles Mima too, and she shatters her cup. When she later reads Mima's diary, it writes that she had gone shopping in Harajuku. Exhausted, Mima accepts this as reality. It's revealed on Double Bind that Mima's character Yoko has multiple personalities due to dissociative identity disorder. This mirrors Rumi's condition, who I've revealed is Mima's other stalker. The frame zooms out and it's revealed that the lewd photographer, who had taken explicit photos of Mima, is watching Double Bind on his TV. The detective in the scene tells the doctor, "Illusions don't kill." The doctor replies, "What if the illusion found someone to possess?" What appears to be Mima shows up at the photographer's apartment dressed as a pizza boy. These lines from Double Bind play out in reality, as this is likely Rumi possessed by the idol Mima illusion. Rumi, envisioning herself as Mima, kills the photographer. This ties into the initial dialogue of Double Bind, where the two same characters speculate that the culprit wants to become the victim. It's this that leads to many spectators to assume these killings were committed by Rumi. As Rumi, a former idol, is desperately trying to become what she is not, idol Mima. And as Rumi, believing herself to be Mima, eliminates the photographer, a projector casts a scene from Double Bind behind them. This could be a representation of Mima's image being literally projected onto Rumi. This is fortified by shots of a mask on the wall. This mask is a traditional Japanese no mask used in theatre. It can therefore suggest that Rumi is wearing the mask of Mima to commit the crime. With all that being said, this is not a definitive answer. After all, there are flashes of images as she takes his life. Those images include flashbacks to the photographer directing her explicit shoot, of which only Mima was present to recall. Or maybe these are just visions of Rumi's imagination. During this scene, we see blue, red, and green again. Shortly after, Mima wakes up for the third time on her bed. She looks at her hands and trembles. Many people interpret this as Mima believing she has committed the crime, but if you remember, Mima also shattered her cup, wounding her hands. Our questioning of what is real or not makes us reach a similar state of delusion and paranoia as Mima. Afterwards, she discovers that the photographer has died, as it's reported on the news. Opening her wardrobe, Mima finds incriminating evidence linking her to the possibility that she has committed the crime. Back on the set of Double Bind, Mima acts as Yoko standing over a slaughtered body. The circular stage appears to be the same as the one when she was assayed. By standing over this body, it appears that Yoko or Mima is taking back the power in this dynamic. Mima passes out and she wakes up for the fourth time. She's initially on her bed, but when she turns around, it appears she's back on the set of Double Bind. This is where things get even more confusing. It's revealed that Yoko, Mima's character on Double Bind, actually believes she's an actress called Mima. This split personality was caused by the assay as a means to deal with her trauma. In Double Bind, Yoko's other personas, like Mima, commit the crimes. A character in Double Bind asks, so where is the persona of the original Yoko? The doctor tells him that Yoko is nothing more than a character in a drama. Because of this revelation, some people believe that Double Bind is not a TV show but rather reality. It could be that Yoko's life is the reality and Mima is the imagined delusion. Double Bind wraps up filming and Mima goes to change for the rap party. Mima bumps into her co-star that plays the doctor. Mima calls her co-star by her character name. Her co-star strangely tells her to stop dreaming soon. Her co-star's exit sets the stage for Me-Mania's entry. He charges at Mima and suddenly we cut to Rumi with Mima's agent. He explains to Rumi that Mima's next film will include more sketchy scenes. The agent gets in his car and we see a glowing white light, like the one surrounding idol Mima, cast on Rumi. The film cuts back to Me-Mania attacking Mima. He is attempting to assay her. This is the first time we hear Me-Mania's voice. He tells his beloved Mima that he is trying to protect her. This is paradoxical as his motives are to keep her pure, yet he is trying to assay her, which would make her impure in his eyes, or at least in the eyes of other fans like him. Mima then pushes Me-Mania off her and after a brief struggle, hits him with a hammer. This feels strange for a few reasons. Firstly, Mima pushes Me-Mania during the attempted assay with relative ease. I'm not saying this wasn't realistic, but I didn't feel too uncomfortable with watching this scene compared to what was supposed to be the fictional assault in Double Bind. Perhaps the reason this scene feels more fictional than the first is because it is. This lends credence to the theory that the dimension with Yoko is reality, and having been assayed, has developed another personality she believes is Mima. After Mima strikes Me-Mania, and we see Mima's face against a red backdrop, a crowd applauds Mima for her performance. It looks as though she is back on the set of Double Bind. Rumi then goes to reassure Mima, driving her back to what appears to be Mima's apartment. As we already know, one interpretation is that idol Mima is Rumi herself. It appears then that both Mima's agent and Me-Mania have been dispatched, both from the eyes. Soon Mima realizes from the amount of fish and the taken down Chan poster that this is not her apartment but a replica. This is confirmed as she opens the curtains. She turns around and sees idol Mima. Both Mima and Rumi lose what was left of their sanity, reflected in the red as opposed to pink that idol Mima is dressed in. This is the first time the truth is reflected. Rumi can be interpreted as the killer and webmaster of Mima's room that impersonates Rumi, thinking she is her. Before we move on, let's discuss why Rumi might do this to Mima. Like the dichotomy of Mima's actress and idol phase, Rumi has her own past and present duality, as Mima's manager and an ex-idol. And as a mother figure to Mima and an ex-idol, and having spent a lot of time cultivating Mima's innocent image for consumption, it's no wonder why she lives vicariously through idol Mima. It could be read that Rumi is unable to accept her current life, from ex-idol to aging manager. And because she's unable to face this reality, Rumi, living vicariously through her, clings onto the hope that Mima can reconcile the gap between Rumi's perception and reality. Unfortunately, Mima deviates from her expectations and pivots to an acting career, cutting Rumi from this emotional supply. As Rumi has already invested so much into her, she can't fathom just moving on and managing someone else. Rumi attacks Mima, but she manages to escape. This leads to a chase where idol Mima runs past a window, revealing the truth again. Mima also catches a glimpse of her own reflection. Instead of seeing an apparition, it finally reveals herself. Rumi shatters this reflection, and the shattering reflection frees Mima from her fractured identity. Rumi proceeds to project her own insecurities onto Mima, as Rumi is the dirty, old imposter. Mima screams that she is Mima. Finally gaining some clarity as to who she is, her identity isn't defined by being either an actress nor an idol. Mima rips Rumi's wig off, throwing it into the shop. This throws Rumi into a state of turmoil. Focused on fetching her wig, she impales herself on the glass. Rumi looks into the fractured glass, but instead of shattering delusions as it did for Mima, it completely shatters her psyche. Rumi's identity has been split and broken beyond repair. This could be why this is the last time we see Rumi's real reflection. Holding her wig, Rumi then staggers out onto the street. She puts this wig back on and becomes idol Mima again. Rumi steps out in front of an oncoming truck. The headlights flood the frame as if Rumi is on stage. Rumi welcomes this light with open arms. Mima jumps out to push Rumi out of the way. The lights dim, bringing them back to reality. For many, taking away Perfect Blue's ambiguity and latching onto one canon theory defeats Con's purpose to purposely disorient viewers with false twists, jarring cuts, and misleading chronology. As a result, there may be many conflicting interpretations to this film, including its ending. One interpretation, and the most common, is that Rumi is the mastermind. She has dissociative identity disorder and is the webmaster behind Mima's room. She convinces Me-Mania to attack Mima, and when he fails, attacks Mima herself. At the end of the film, Rumi is housed in a psychiatric hospital, where she still sees idol Mima reflected in the mirror. Rumi will no longer see herself, consumed entirely by her delusion. Mima, on the other hand, finally sees the perfect blue sky. Mima has matured. Her hair is longer, and it can be assumed that Mima is no longer in the transition of becoming an actress, but has properly established herself as one. She has completed her metamorphosis from pop idol to actress, from childhood to adulthood. Mima has accepted the reality that she can only move in one direction. There is no more uncertainty, confusion, or identity crisis. The illusions vanish. Regaining her identity, she no longer is haunted by the ghosts of her past. Though she'll likely still be exploited as an actress and an adult, she gains some semblance of autonomy as she makes this choice herself. At the end, Mima's final line is, "No, I'm real." The most standard interpretation is that Mima has moved on, no longer trapped in the toxicity of being idealized. As she smiles at her reflection, the white light, which had always been previously in front of her, is now behind her. We also see the perfect blue sky that may now symbolize hope is situated in front of her. A common alternative is that this isn't Mima but Rumi. In the Japanese dub, this last line is actually said by Rumi's voice actress. Throughout the film, we're led to believe these are Mima's delusions, but it could be that these were all Rumi's hallucinations. Or it could be that this is Yoko, stuck in a parallel reality, entirely convinced that she is an esteemed actress called Mima. There are many interpretations of the ending and the final line, so ultimately I think it's open to interpretation. It could just be a comment on how we can't be certain about our identity. Instead of coming to a definitive conclusion, I think it's best just to leave this up to you to come up with your own interpretation of the film. Finally, I know it has been pointed out that Perfect Blue has, at the very least, influenced films like Black Swan and Requiem for a Dream. There are some similarities in the shots and the use of reflections in Black Swan. Both heroines have similar names, Mima and Nina, face external pressures, and have delusions. But I think this is a separate topic for a separate video, and I wanted to focus only on Perfect Blue. Thanks for watching, and feel free to leave a comment about what your interpretation of Perfect Blue is.